The moment my daughter-in-law looked me in the eye and told the state I was mentally incompetent, she made a fatal mistake. Sarcastic. She assumed that at 68, my mind had become as soft as the Montana soil after a spring rain. She saw a lonely widower rattling around a 750-acre ranch, a relic of a man who spent too much time staring at stars through a telescope. What she forgot, what she willfully ignored, was that for 38 years, I was the chief forensic medical examiner for the state of Montana. Exhales sharply. I spent 4 decades reading the stories that dead men told. I know how to find the hesitation marks in a lie. I know how to track the lividity of a betrayal. And when the Adult Protective Services social worker finally walked into my dining room, she didn't find a confused old man. Surprised, she found a crime scene. She saw the evidence laid out with the cold, surgical precision of an autopsy, and the revelation was so staggering, so legally radioactive, that she actually screamed in shock and had to grip the table to keep from collapsing. Jennifer thought she was going to steal my land and bury me in a nursing home. She didn't realize I'd already performed the post-mortem on her soul 7 years ago. My name is Walter King. For 15 years, this ranch, 18 miles west of Billings, has been my sanctuary. Before that, my office was a sterile room filled with the smell of formaldehyde and the heavy silence of the departed. In my line of work, you learn a singular, immutable truth. Evidence never lies. People lie with every breath, every smile, and every "I love you." But the body, the documents, the blood spatter, they are the only honest witnesses we have. Retirement was supposed to be my reward for a lifetime spent in the company of death. My son, Scott, is 39. 9 years ago, he brought Jennifer into our lives. At first, she was a masterclass in performance art. She'd bring homemade peach cobbler to family dinners, her eyes wide with simulated wonder as she asked me about the history of the ranch. I remember her sitting on the porch, the sunset painting her face in warm, deceptive oranges, telling me how blessed Scott was to have this legacy. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But have you ever felt that small, cold prickle on the back of your neck that tells you the cause of death isn't what it looks like on the surface? The shift was a slow-growing malignancy. About 3 years ago, the peach cobblers stopped, replaced by probing questions about tax implications and probate avoidance. She'd phrase it as concern, her voice dripping with a synthetic sweetness that set my teeth on edge. "Walter, have you thought about what happens when you're no longer able to manage things?" she'd ask. Scott would stay silent, staring at his phone, his spine stiff with a guilt he wasn't strong enough to act on. That was my first clue. My second came last March. I came back to the house early from the barn and caught Jennifer in my office. She jumped, her hand flying to her chest, claiming she was just looking for a pen, but her phone was positioned perfectly over my property deed folder. When I asked her what she needed to write, she laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes, and vanished. I went to that folder immediately. The documents weren't missing, but they were out of sequence. Someone had been conducting an inventory of my life. I'm 68, not senile. I've testified in front of the harshest defense attorneys in the country. I've built evidence chains that put monsters in cages. Did she really think I wouldn't notice a breach in my own perimeter? 6 weeks ago, the active phase of the betrayal began. Scott called me for lunch in Billings, a steakhouse on Montana Avenue. He was sweating, his hands shaking as he adjusted his napkin. "Dad," he started, unable to look me in the eye. "Jennifer and I think it's smart to transfer the ranch title to my name for tax purposes. You'd stay there, of course. Nothing would change." I put my fork down. The steak suddenly tasted like ash. I looked at my son, the boy I'd taught to ride, the boy whose hand I'd held when we buried his mother, and I realized he was no longer my son. He was a co-conspirator. "No," I said. One word, surgical. "Dad, it's just practical." I said no, Scott. His jaw tightened. For a split second, the mask slipped, and I saw a flash of raw, hungry resentment. "Jennifer's not going to like this," he whispered. "I imagine she won't," I replied. From that moment on, I became a ghost in my own family. My calls went to voicemail. My texts were ignored. The Sunday dinners that had been a tradition for a decade were canceled with one-word excuses. I stood in my kitchen, looking at a roast I'd prepared for a family that didn't exist anymore, and that's when the examiner in me took over. I stopped being a father and started being a prosecutor. I knew she'd strike. I just didn't know how low she'd go. Before I tell you about the letter that changed everything, I want to invite you to join our community. We tell stories about men who refuse to be victims, men who take back their power from those who think they can be discarded. Subscribe to our new channel now, where we document the brutal consequences for those who betray their own blood. The letter arrived 3 weeks after the steakhouse lunch. It was wedged in my front door, Yellowstone County Adult Protective Services. An anonymous report had been filed. It claimed I was experiencing severe cognitive decline. It claimed I was vulnerable to exploitation. It claimed I was a danger to myself. A social worker named Linda Garcia was scheduled to arrive in 3 days to assess if I should be stripped of my rights and placed under guardianship. The cold clarity that used to settle over me in the autopsy suite returned. I didn't get angry. Anger is a pollutant. It clouds the vision. I sat at my kitchen table, the morning sun hitting the spot where my wife used to sit, and I began to build my case. Jennifer thought she was playing checkers. She had no idea I'd been playing chess since 2019. You see, I never fully trusted the way she looked at my land. When I gave them $80,000 for their house on West End Drive 7 years ago, I didn't give it as a gift. I had my attorney, Gerald Peterson, draw up a very specific, very ironclad promissory note. They signed it in the presence of a notary, Margaret Turner. Jennifer had been so eager to get her hands on the money that she hadn't bothered to read the fine print. She'd signed it with a flourish, laughing about family helping family. But that document contained a poison pill. Paragraph 7, subsection C. In the event that the borrowers attempted to gain control of the lender's assets through fraudulent means, including but not limited to false claims of mental incapacity, the loan would become immediately due in full. Failure to pay within 72 hours would result in the immediate transfer of the collateral, their house, to me. She had handed me the scalpel herself. I called my old friend Bob Henderson, a retired detective turned private investigator. Bob, I said, I think someone's trying to steal my ranch. I need a full forensic audit of Jennifer King's life. Family? Bob asked. Family, I confirmed. It's always family, Walter. I'll be there in an hour. While Bob started digging, I went to Billings for a preemptive strike. I spent 3 hours with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a top-tier cognitive specialist. I took every test they had: memory recall, spatial reasoning, the mini-mental state examination. I wanted a documented baseline that no court could dispute. Mr. King, Dr. Mitchell said, looking over my results, your cognitive function is in the 99th percentile for your age. Whoever reported you is either delusional or malicious. I need that in a notarized report, I told her, by tomorrow. When I got home, Bob was waiting with a folder that would have made a shark flinch. She's been busy, Walter, he said, spreading photos across my desk. Here she is 3 weeks ago, meeting with a real estate developer in Bozeman. They were looking at maps of your ranch. She told him she'd have access to the property very soon. She was already planning the subdivision. 75-acre lots, high-end luxury homes. My heart felt like a block of ice. She wasn't just stealing my home. She was planning to carve up my soul and sell it by the acre. There's more, Bob continued. I got her emails. She's been talking to a guardianship attorney for months. She called you the old man and the asset. She was planning to move you into a facility in Great Falls, one of those places where the doors lock from the outside. When does a son stop being a son and start being a predator? Does it happen all at once, or is it a slow erosion of character until there's nothing left but greed? I looked at the photos of Jennifer smiling at the developer, and I felt a sense of resolve so powerful it was almost religious. I wasn't just defending my ranch, I was defending the truth. The morning of the APS visit, the air was crisp and still. Gerald, my attorney, and Bob, my investigator, arrived at 9:30 a.m. We set up in the dining room. I had folders organized by category: medical, financial, surveillance, and legal. We were ready for surgery. At exactly 10 a.m., Linda Garcia pulled into the driveway. She was a professional woman in her 40s. her face a mask of practiced neutrality. She'd seen the worst of humanity: neglected seniors, starving elders, families who'd stolen every penny. She expected to find a victim. "Mr. King," she said, shaking my hand, "I'm here to follow up on a report of concern for your welfare." "Please, come in, Linda," I said, my voice steady. "I've been expecting you." I led her to the kitchen. I'd made fresh coffee. I'd set the stage perfectly. I was wearing a pressed shirt, my hair was neat, and the house was spotless. I walked her through my daily routine, my horse feeding schedule, and my astronomy logs. I showed her the meal prep calendar on my fridge and my perfectly organized medication tray. "You seem exceptionally self-sufficient, Mr. King," she noted, her pen hovering over her tablet. "I am," I said, "which makes me wonder why someone would tell you otherwise. Shall we move to the dining room? I have some things I'd like to show you." We walked into the room where Gerald and Bob were waiting. Linda paused, her eyes widening at the sight of the two men and the mountain of documentation. "Miss Garcia," Gerald started, "we aren't here to just prove Walter's competence. We are here to report a crime. What you're looking at is a systematic attempt at elder financial abuse and fraud." One by one, we opened the folders. Folder 1, Dr. Mitchell's report. "I scored a 29 out of 30 on the MMSE, Linda," I said. "Does that sound like cognitive decline to you?" She read the report, her eyebrows climbing toward her hairline. Folder 2, the financial records. "I manage an $87,000 annual profit on this ranch," I said. "I've never missed a tax payment. My credit score is higher than most people half my age." Folder 3, this was the blunt force trauma. Bob laid out the emails between Jennifer and the developer, the subdivision maps, the emails to the guardianship attorney, the surveillance footage of Jennifer in my office, her phone out, photographing my private documents. Linda's face went from pale to ghostly. She was reading the words, "The old man is sitting on $2 million in equity, and we need to trigger the APS investigation to get the ball rolling." "This," Linda stammered, her voice shaking, "this is a fabricated report. This is a felony." "It is," I said, "but we aren't finished. There's one more document you need to see." Gerald slid the 2019 promissory note across the table, followed by the quitclaim deed filed 24 hours ago. "Linda," I said, "I gave my son and his wife $80,000 for their house. They signed a contract stating that if they ever tried to defraud me or claim I was incompetent, the loan would be due immediately. I sent the demand for repayment the day I received your letter. They didn't pay. They couldn't pay. So, as of yesterday at 5 o'clock, I am the legal owner of their home. Jennifer tried to take my ranch. Instead, I took her house." That's when it happened. Linda Garcia, a woman who had seen it all, let out a sharp, jagged scream of pure shock. She had to sit down, her hand over her mouth, her eyes darting between the deed and the emails. "I have never, in 16 years, I have never seen someone do this," she whispered. "Evidence never lies, Linda," I said quietly. "People do." The fallout was a beautiful, chaotic landslide. Linda Garcia closed the investigation on the spot, but she didn't stop there. She was so disgusted by the manipulation of her office that she filed a formal report with the county attorney for attempted exploitation of an older person. Jennifer's name was now on a list she could never get off. My phone started exploding an hour later. It was Scott. He was hysterical. "Dad, what did you do? Jennifer's at the county recorder's office screaming. She's saying you stole our house. The bank says the deed transferred. Dad, we have nowhere to go." "You have 30 days to vacate, Scott," I said, "or you can stay and pay me $2,400 a month in rent. I'll expect the first check by Friday." "Dad, please, I didn't know she'd go this far." "You knew enough to stay silent while she planned to put me in a cage, Scott. Desiring something isn't a crime. But greed has a way of turning family into forensic evidence. You made your choice." I hung up. The next few weeks were a surgical deconstruction of Jennifer's life. Bob filed a formal ethics complaint with the Montana Board of Realty Regulation. He included the evidence of her using her professional credentials to access my private property data for personal gain. Jennifer wasn't just losing her house, she was losing her livelihood. The Billings Gazette ran the story on the front page. Rancher fights back against family fraud. Sarah Chen, the reporter, didn't hold back. She quoted the emails. She mentioned the subdivision plans. She painted Jennifer as the predator she was. By the following Monday, Jennifer's real estate firm had fired her. Reputational risk, they called it. I called it justice. Jennifer tried to fight. She hired a high-priced attorney, but he withdrew the moment his retainer check bounced. She was drowning in debt she'd hidden from Scott. $73,000 in credit card bills, missed mortgage payments, a life built on a foundation of sand. My $80,000 had been the only thing keeping them afloat, and now that anchor was gone. 3 weeks later, I met Scott at a coffee shop. He looked 10 years older. His car had been repossessed. He was living out of boxes. "She's gone, Dad," he said, his voice hollow. "I told her to leave. When I saw the emails, when I saw the subdivision plans, I realized she never loved me. She loved the ranch. She was just using me to get to you." "I know," I said. "I'll testify," he whispered. "Whatever you need. I'll sign a confession. I'll tell the truth about the promissory note. Just don't hate me." I looked at him, the man who had nearly let his wife destroy his father. "I don't hate you, Scott. I'm just disappointed that you forgot who we were. We were a team once. You traded that for a lie." I gave him a check for $15,000. Not for Jennifer, for him. "This is to get you an apartment. This is your one and only fresh start. If you ever let her back in, if you ever lie to me again, you will never see a cent of this ranch. It's already going to a foundation for elder protection in my will." He took the check, his tears falling onto the paper. "Thank you, Dad." The final confrontation happened in Gerald's office. Jennifer had to sign a full notarized confession in exchange for me not pursuing the Class C felony charges. She sat across from me, her face gaunt, her expensive highlights grown out. The ivory mask had crumbled, leaving behind a bitter, hollow shell. "I hope you're happy," she spat as she signed the document. "You destroyed me. You took everything." "No, Jennifer," I said, leaning forward. "You destroyed yourself. You saw an old man and you thought weakness. You saw a ranch and you thought payday. You forgot that I've spent my life looking at the cold, hard facts of what people do to each other. You weren't a daughter-in-law. You were just another case study in greed." She left Montana 3 days later. Last I heard, she was working a retail job in Idaho, her real estate license revoked, her reputation a blackened ruin. Tonight, the ranch is quiet. I'm back in my observatory, the telescope pointed toward Jupiter. The stars don't lie. They follow the laws of physics, constant and enduring, regardless of what humans do down here in the dirt. My house is secure. My son is slowly, painfully trying to find his way back to being a man I can respect. Family is a bond until it becomes a transaction. Once the price tag comes out, the love is dead. And once something is dead, you have to perform the autopsy, you have to find out what killed it, document the damage, and move on. I never raised my voice, I never threatened her, I didn't have to, I just let the evidence speak. And in the end, the truth was the most brutal consequence of all. If you've ever had to stand your ground against someone you thought was family, remember this: documentation is your only shield. Don't be a victim. Be the examiner of your own life. Would you like me to tell you the story of how I found out what happened to my wife's missing jewelry after Jennifer moved in? Or perhaps you'd like to see the footage Bob found of her meeting with the developer. Subscribe and let me know in the comments. I'm still here. I'm still watching. And as always, the evidence never lies. Like and subscribe to ensure you never miss a lesson in justice.